This is burnt umber and white on a gray prepared ground in acrylic. I will show you all the materials and setup and do this drawing on camera for you. Here are the brushes I used in this, and there's only 3 of them. The 2 filberts and 1 round, all synthetic and relatively inexpensive. Here's the palette I'm going to use for this. Super simple. I got a brown, basically a burnt umber color, or black is fine, white, and this, which is golden acrylic neutral gray number 6, which is what I prepared the paper with, as I've showed you. So it's handy to have your ground colors. You can basically erase with it and pull it back down to the blank gray that you have. Also, since I'm not using a Stay Wet palette, I'm just going to use a little sprayer and mist these from time to time. And I just use a piece of scrap wood because that way it's very easy to see how the acrylic is diluting out. Here's our old friend sphere. I'm doing the sphere in burnt umber and white, laying in the shadow in a wash of burnt umber and the direct light only with the white. Panning back for just a second, just so you can see where I have a brush washer here, which just a regular jar would work, but I also have this, which is just water, but it's clean. That way, if this water starts to get really dirty, I don't want to have a clean, bright highlight, it's not going to get muddied by the water. And here I have some paper towel to rinse out the extra water, because you'll find it's easier to control if you're a little bit drier. It's very much like an ink wash that's dark and an ink wash that's light. So I'm going to start with the dark umber here and test a little dot of it. So I'm going to start as usual by getting the action down first, and then I'll check proportion. And remember, it is going to make you accurate more quickly to guess first and then check. So I'm just going to estimate where everything's going. Head, rib cage. Make sure the feet will fit on here. The head can come down a little bit. So one of the advantages of working with my ground color that I have prepped this with is I can really erase with it if I want to get rid of things. Another thing that's really, I think, important to mention right away about acrylic is that it's going to be lighter going on. There's a change from wet to dry. Acrylic by itself, if you put it on something, is a little bit like Elmer's glue. It goes on milky and then slowly dries to transparent. So you can see that that's lighter than the ground, but by the time I get this going even a little bit, it will be dried down to the same color and value as the ground. Ground being the piece of what I painted the paper with, since they're exactly the same thing. So I got head, rib cage, pelvis, weight-bearing leg, and weight-bearing leg and the other leg. Now I'm basically starting with a contour line brush drawing to map out the features and just really get the gesture. So once I feel like I have the gesture, I should probably use a piece of paper towel for that. It's probably a better habit to wipe off the excess acrylic. I tend to just use my finger, which actually works pretty well. I think I have his leg a little short. It's probably to about there. So now I have a little bit of the action, although he needs his arms to really make the action complete, and he's got something in them. So now the action's fairly clear. Now is when I would want to check proportion. So I'm going to count down head heights and just check how many heads high he is. It's around 4 heads. He's standing up pretty straight, so it's going to be about 4 heads to the bottom of the pelvis. So let's decide what head height's going to be. And then I can just mark it off and check. I was pretty close. Then I can check, say, from his foot to where I just said the bottom of the pelvis was, and see how far up that comes on him. That is to about the middle of the head. So I was pretty close with the height. So I just checked head heights down to the bottom of the pelvis, bottom of the foot to the bottom of the pelvis, and checked that back up to get a vertical proportion, which was about right. Now I want to check the length of his leg here against a height. So I'm just going to say on my estimate, it is from the bottom of the pelvis to about the top of the torso. On the model, it is a little bit longer than that. I would say it's up closer to a little closer to the chin. So that means I was wrong and my leg has to come out, which is fine. That's why we want to start light and simple so that we can change things as we need to. So I'm just going to pull my ground color back over that because that'll dry down. And again, in between colors, I am washing out my brush. Now that I know that leg goes out a little further, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out a little further. And the aim of this is to work more transparently rather than opaquely. I'm trying to build up the colors because the umber is nice and warm if I put it on transparently, right? If I mix it with white, and you can see that, as I said, the N6 that I have painted underneath has now dried down. You can't really tell where it is. So let's say I want to match that by mixing with white. It's going to be a little colder. You can see that mixing the white in makes it go colder. So I'm going to keep my, there, that's a little closer to the same value. I'm going to keep my lights and darks both transparent and build them up slowly. And if I have, this is getting a little bit messy, I can always clean it up with my ground color. And if you're using a Stay Wet palette, it'll stay wet longer. If you're not, like I'm not, just remember to spray down your acrylic once in a while. And even if you are using a Stay Wet palette, it can be good to spray down your acrylic once in a while to keep it from skinning over. So my big proportional things are checking out okay. I also maybe want to check balance, make sure his head is not coming too far forward. Our neck tends to have a little bit of forward thrust to it. So I just want to check it there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and speed this up and go ahead and build this up more. So now that I've checked my proportion, I'm going to go ahead and deal with volume. I'm going to do that by starting to build up washes of transparent dark with the burnt umber. And you'll notice I'm correcting a lot with that golden N6. That's very handy, being able to undo things, basically pull down to the paper tone. And I'm doing that throughout the drawing, just correcting the tilt of things, watching the proportion, and checking my values. And you can see I was a little bit wrong everywhere, so it makes a lot of sense to start these values light and build them up. So as I build up, at the end of the drawing, I end up with more contrast, putting the brightest highlights on and the darkest darks, and continually correcting everywhere. So this is almost done. And here's the drawing at the end. And I want to show you one other drawing. The drawing we looked at the beginning, although you could maybe call this painting since we're really making everything with a brush. So I'm going to just go fast the whole time, but go through the same thing, starting with the action, building things up, checking my proportion a lot, and then working my volume with the darks, where basically where the model's in night with the burnt umber, and where the model is in day, if the model was a planet, with the white. So continually just working my way around, building up the values gradually so I don't get in too much trouble, If I do get in trouble, I'll pull it back down with the ground color. So I think you'll find this technique is pretty useful and fun and can actually go pretty quickly. I hope that you'll like it. And I just want to show you one more thing, which is some 2-minute drawings using the same technique. So really all I have time for with these is the gesture and a little bit of volume. I don't have time for any detail or really to double check the proportion. And I'm using only one fairly large brush so I can lay in those washes all at the same time. They'll stay nice and flat if you use a bigger brush. So I hope you enjoyed this.